everyone, Matt Williamson back at you as we're doing every day here. Devin Bush, obviously a huge topic of conversation with the Steelers, with all of you, and he's worrisome. I mean, there's no way around that. I mean, they gave up a lot to go get him, and we'll address that here in a minute. I've told you a lot of what I think of Bush, and I don't think the book is totally written. But I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be Robin. He's not going to be Batman. And you drafted him to be Batman. I mean, so is he ever going to live up to what you paid for him? Probably not. That doesn't necessarily matter anymore on August 24th, 2022. He's here. He's going to play. He's a starter. I don't think Spillane has any chance to unseat him. I also think that there will be more and more packages with Jack as the only linebacker on the field. Dime, big nickel on base downs instead of base personnel. So there's a lot of things you can do to get him off the field. But he's going to play, and he's going to play, assuming everyone stays healthy, the second most snaps of any linebacker, unless someone falls in their lap that's a veteran, and I would be open to grabbing one of those guys. Maybe there's a team out there, a rebuilding team, that has a third-round pick this year or last year that they want to get on the field, but they have a 6-year veteran that's making a little bit of money that's kind of in the way. Sometimes those guys get traded or even cut. So I think they should be open to that. However, I didn't think Bush played bad on Saturday, and I think while I've just said a lot of bad things about him, he's better than most of you think. He's not the worst linebacker in the league. There's still ability there. He still makes mistakes, but I think so far this year in this camp and these 2 games, he's been more fundamentally sound and he's moving better than he did last year. So I think the arrow's pointing up. It's not through the roof, stock's gone crazy going up, but I think it's slightly going up, which is promising. What I haven't seen, and which I think is really worrisome, though, is so few splash plays or wow plays. Like you would think a guy like that, the common watcher could just be watching defense like, whoa, he's a black and gold flash across the screen, sideline to sideline, or gets his hands on footballs. Hasn't been the case. Doesn't mean it won't be. This is going to take a little time, so I'm going to dig right into it. But this, I think, will be very eye-opening to you guys, is first-round linebackers are so far from a sure thing. And times have changed dramatically for these guys. And here's the reason. First of all, coverage is king. You have to affect the passing game. Few, none, are Micah Parsons that can do it as a blitzer, a pass rusher off the edge in a TJ Watt-like fashion, and be a great second-level player. So I'm only talking about second-level players. I'm not talking about edge guys that got drafted that NFL called linebackers. I'm talking about pure off-the-ball guys. There have been some good second- and third-round picks, some very good ones, the Fred Warners, the Leonards, those type of dudes. But I'm going to go through all the first-round picks in the last 10 years or so. The hit rate is unbelievably low. And the key is there are some positions, tight end comes to mind, corner comes to mind, and linebacker was never one of these, that your rookie year and early in your career is a lot harder than a lot of people think. And the reasoning is it's twofold. First of all, coverage is hard at this level. It just is. And you're playing a different game in terms of where the hash marks are. You have a lot of run and hit, 215-pound linebacker types that just play to the field in the college level. They play, the hash marks are much more condensed, so that you have a big wide area, or much wider, I'm sorry. So you have a big wide, section of the field that they can just run and hit and play in space. But more so than that is linebackers just get manipulated. Kyle Shanahan looks at rookie linebackers and says, I'm going to play action him to death. I am going to manipulate him, put him in conflict to death, with motions and all these stuff that Matt Canada's trying to put in too. It affects those linebackers' eyes and makes them hesitate for just a second. College level, you can hesitate for 2 seconds and you run a 4.4, you track a guy down. This league, you cannot. And I'm going to make this segment kind of short, just talking a little bit about Bush and why these guys struggle. But next segment, I want to go through all the first-round linebackers of late, and it'll amaze you guys that the hit rate is unbelievably low, which then brings up the conversation. And again, there's some hindsight here. Should the Steelers have traded up for Bush? Of course not. We know that. But should anybody trade up for a linebacker? Should you really use early picks on linebackers? It has not been a good investment lately, and that's more of a big picture thing. But one of the things, if you guys are unfamiliar with my work, that I think I bring to the table, at least as much as anyone in the city of Pittsburgh, if not more, is an understanding of the other 31 teams. And the Steelers fans, love you guys, but you're blinded by black and gold and don't see the rest of the league particularly well. So they're not alone in terms of investing in linebackers that are, again, off-the-ball guys that have not been happy with their investment. So when we come back, I'm going to go through them all to prove my point. All right, we're back. I randomly picked the year, not to make myself look better or whatever. I just picked everything since 2014. And here's the reason I took 2014. That's the Ryan Shazier class. And Steelers used 15th pick on Shazier. We all know how that went. It was going very, very well. They were happy with it. But in the drafts since then, these are the guys that have been off-the-ball linebackers, and here's how their careers have gone. Also, the year Shazier was picked, the Vikings took Anthony Barr, and the Ravens took C.J. Mosley. Neither one of those guys is going to the Hall of Fame, but they weren't busts. They weren't terrible picks. So let's start in 2015, and shortly after this is when the Steelers really became linebacker needy, of course, because of Ryan's unfortunate accident on the field. So 2015, this is the year the Steelers took Bud Dupree. I am not counting him as a linebacker, but there were two off-the-ball linebackers in that class. Shaq Thompson with the Panthers, who, here's the deal with Shaq Thompson, and this isn't uncommon, and this could still happen to Bush. Shaq Thompson was the 25th pick overall. He was a raw athlete, and he struggled for the first couple years. Now I consider him one of the best linebackers in the league. But this is 2022, and from 2015 to 2018, he looked a lot like Bush, so things worked out for him. The other first-round linebacker was Stephon Anthony from Clemson with the Saints. Total bust. Really did nothing in the league at all. Late first-round pick. 2016, Deron Lee, 20th pick overall to the Jets. Total bust. I think he might still be playing football. Anthony is not. But barely, and if so, it's as a special teamer. He does not see defensive snaps. He got manipulated to no end by quarterbacks, and his recognition skills just weren't close to being on par. By the way, that's also the year Miles Jack was drafted in the second round. He was a 36th pick overall, just for a frame of reference. So let's go to the next year, 2017. There was only one off-the-ball linebacker that year. Well, there was two. This was the year T.J. Watt was drafted. I'm not counting him as an off-the-ball linebacker. The Lions took Gerard Davis. Small, gets pushed around, bad recognition skills. I think he's in the league, but barely. Started a lot of games, not particularly well. Often was looked to get replaced, and now he has been. And then I almost don't want to count Reuben Foster. He was the 31st pick overall. Immensely talented with immense off-the-field issues, no longer a football player. So he may not count. He's sort of a different beast altogether. 2018. Now, 2018 is really interesting because this was the year everyone wanted the Steelers to draft a linebacker. This is when the search really began for Shazier's replacement. Steelers end up taking Edmonds that year because they got shut out on the top linebackers. And Leonard was the next linebacker taken. Nobody thought he was a first-round pick. I'm not going to blame the Steelers for not taking Darius Leonard. By the way, Edmonds is getting a lot better, And I think he's going to be a major part of making up for the Bush shortcomings. So again, with nickel, dime, whatnot, big nickel. So you guys probably remember this class. It went Roquan, Tremaine Edmonds, Leighton Vander Esch, Rashaan Evans. I know all you guys want to trade for Roquan Smith. He's turned the corner, but much like Bush and much like a lot of these guys, his first couple years in the league were worrisome. He had splash plays, though, which is great, but consistency was not there for Smith. I think it is now. I also think that's why people are hesitant to give up what it would take to draft, to acquire him and then pay him. But I think he's over the hump as a high-quality linebacker. Tremaine Edmonds, I thought, would be a little better at this point, but he's a highly important piece on a great Bills defense. They're happy with him. He's a good pick. He'll be borderline Pro Bowler, in that neighborhood. Might still get better as these guys do. I expected a little more, but I'm not being hard on them. They're happy that they use a 16th pick on him. So that's a hit. Vander Esch is not, and neither is Rashaan Evans. Those are the guys, realistically, a lot of us thought the Steelers would be in on. Vander Esch had one good year and has been basically benched ever since, or rotated in. Rashaan Evans now is not a Titan. He is a Falcon and is playing for them, but probably wouldn't play on just about any other defense in the league. So, there were 4 linebackers that I just mentioned that everyone thought one of them would end up as going into the Steelers. They all went in the top 22 picks, and they got about a 50% hit rate there, and that was a good linebacker class. So, case in point. Next year is the Steelers' year that they took Devin Bush. We know about him. He was the only other first rounder was Devin White, who everyone thinks is way better than Bush. He is. He's a better player than Bush. However, White has had about as easy a transition as you're going to get at that position. He's been protected by Namakong Su and Vita Vea, and Bush didn't have that advantage last year, but he has been protected well by the Cam Haywards and Tuarts of the world. But he also is playing next to one of the best linebackers of this generation in Levante David, who's an unbelievably positive influence on White. So he fell into a perfect nest. Still, and even to this day, I think he's one of the most overrated players in the league. His splash, though, is unbelievable. It's as good as any linebackers in the league. Rare explosion, rare speed. Still does the wrong thing a lot, though, and still gets picked on in coverage. I bet in Buck practices when Brady wants to, he picks apart Devin White, and knows how to do it. So he's far from a home run prospect. They're happy with him. Don't get me wrong. He makes a ton of plays. He has rare abilities, but he's not a superstar as people think. 2020, the first round picks were Isaiah Simmons, who Arizona is finally figuring out what to do with him. And this is what they're doing with him. He's playing slot and he's blitzing a lot, which is exactly what he did at Clemson. And even some deep middle free safety is what he did at Clemson. But he really isn't a linebacker. If you asked him to do Devin Bush things, which they did early in his career, he struggled drastically. The Chargers used the 23rd pick on Kenneth Murray. Total bust. Replaced him. I think he's still on the team, but snaps when Murray's on the field is bad. A guy I have super high hopes for here is Jordan Brooks. I think he is going to take over really well for Bobby Wagner, who kind of like White had a mentor to learn from. Very, very important for him. I think he's going to be a high quality player, but this is going to be the first year, well, I guess last year, that he's really been counted on. So they brought him along. They nurtured him very, very well, as the Bucs did with White. Last first rounder that year is Patrick Queen from the hated Ravens. Really up and down to this point. And this is sort of like what I mentioned with Big Nickel. I think they're going to make Queen's life a lot easier now with 3 safeties. After drafting the stud from Notre Dame, they're going to play a lot of 3 safety stuff and count less on Patrick Queen. But he still has a chance to be a good player. He's not a great player. I mentioned Parsons before. He was a rookie last year. Utter superstar. But Zaven Collins couldn't play for the Cardinals, and I loved him coming out of school. I thought the Steelers should have considered him in the first round that year. He couldn't beat out the guys ahead of him, so he's been a liability. This is already a pivotal year for Zaven Collins, an untraditional 6'5" type linebacker with some rare traits, but they didn't trust him at all. I mean, he was all over the place as a rookie. And then the other one last year was Jamin Davis to Washington. I mean, he went to the football team at the time. Really athletic, really terrible rookie year. I mean, massive liability for Washington right off the bat, and again, pivotal time in his career. They're still counting on Collins and Davis. Brutal rookie years. So I'm not going to talk about this year's rookie class. I mean, that's Quay Walker and Devin Lloyd. But we'll see. They haven't played NFL snaps yet in terms of real-time stuff. But I just listed a lot of linebackers there. And not only is Bush not the worst of the group, it's just a lot of, and this is not an excuse for Bush, I'm just showing you the facts, there's a lot of proof that high pedigree, great combine guys, big time, quote, I'm putting in air quote, draft prospects that were great in college too. I mean, that they do not translate well, or certainly early in their careers. Not a lot of success stories in that group, and a lot of those picks were pretty darn high, as was Bush. So I thought this was fun, just to give you guys a little perspective of what other teams are dealing with in the same situation. That's a wrap, though. Over and out.